Yo, what up? It's Tuna. Today's video, I'm gonna be showcasing the build that I've been basically pouring all of my currency into. That is a Spark Trickster, and it's actually a Spark Trickster that inflicts crits. Like usually, Spark Trickster plays EO, but this one specifically is a critical strike based Spark Trickster, and it is not using the bow. We're going for proj speed stacking on basically as many pieces as we can get it. Huge disclaimer, this build is extremely expensive. It's one of those builds that maybe you aspire to play, or one of those builds that you work up to playing. It's kind of like a league-long project type of thing. It's not by any means any budget build that you can just get going for, 100 divs or something like that. Like, you want Mage Blood, you want the items. There's some shortcuts you can take here and there in regards to some of the items, but for the most part, everything is, yeah. But the cool thing is that crafting for this build generally results in profit. Depending on whether you're crafting things for yourself, there's always ways to sort of, make items for yourself. And if you end up fracturing a modifier that's not good for you, you can always sell that off. And that is basically what I did for every piece that I have. And you might end up with a couple gloves or like a couple body armors, helmets, and you sell those off, or you just craft off of them yourself. And yeah, maybe this is also a useful video for people that are interested in profit crafting, because these pieces are honestly selling for like way too much for how much they cost to make. But overall, I mean, you know how it is with crafting. You might be on the unlucky side or the lucky side, but eventually it does even out. Talking about the build. The build is extremely tanky. It's really strong. Like it does a ton of damage per projectile. I'm dealing like 9 million. It shoots like really fast, and this is not even as fast as it goes. I'm using the haunted enchantments, which I was actually like holding out on making this video until I figured like until GGG would like buff these, but they're not buffing the power runes, it seems. So yeah, it seems like these are just gonna remain being expensive for the remainder of the league, unfortunately. But they're really cool in that they give you some insane buffs. What this does is you get haunted by ghosts, and on top of being haunted by ghosts, as you can see here, I'm possessed. It gives you buffs. So it gives you 35% increased cast speed, 35% increased movement speed, and attack speed. Now the attack speed is irrelevant for us, but the the cast speed and movement speed is very relevant, because we're getting a bunch of our movement speed from that, and without that would be pretty slow. Relocation Patience no longer gives movement speed. Yeah, that's pretty nice, but the cast speed is the important part. Like, you can see just how crazy it is, like how fast we can cast and how fast we can actually end up going with just like Frostblink as well. Which this is, linked to Spell Echo, but essentially that means that our character is just like zooming through maps. And it'd be maybe cool to give you guys a showcase of what that looks like in an actual map. So, for example, if I was to take this into a jungle valley, I'm gonna chuck it in Alk and go. Yeah, it is very fast. And yeah, on top of the cast speed, movement speed, and that sort of stuff that the haunted modifiers give you, they give you additional mods depending on which ghost haunts you. I wasn't really too bothered in like figuring all of that stuff out, what the buffs give you and that kind of stuff, because it is random. So you're just basically getting a random buff every time you enter an instance, and the way that you get a new buff is you enter a new instance. You see here that I am possessed, so I am not yet possessed, but it takes about 10 seconds for it to kick in. As soon as I get the green little thing around me, as you can see right now I'm possessed, and my character is just gonna start zooming, and this is what it would look like in an Alkengo map. You can pretty much like tank all of this stuff, and your ES won't really ever move. You have Trickster Overleech. You have a massive amount of defenses from all of the Trickster goodness. You have like 60,000 evasion. You will start this build, you'll probably have like 9,000 energy shield, but now I'm getting to the min-max numbers. I have 11,500, as you can see. And yeah, the build just kind of looks like this. Like, your projectiles are flying everywhere, they're really fast. Spark does favor closed instances and that sort of stuff, but I mean, it can do open instances too. And you're pretty much like, you're good to click any quantity alter aside for one, which is reduced defenses per frenzy charge. You don't want to be clicking that, because unfortunately that is going to chunk down your energy shield from something like 11,500. To me, it takes me down to like 7,000. And yeah, that is basically what it looks like, the map with this build. It's pretty fast, it's very fun, and has been my favorite build of the league. And yeah, that's why I really recommend it, but of course, as I said previously, it's only really recommended to those who can afford it. It's super expensive, it's super duper expensive. But it's one of those builds that does reward you for, you know, for putting in the effort as well as investing, which is well, a lot of people tend to like. You know, having seen like how popular Molten Strike of Zenith is, how expensive it is, I think this build is something that people can consider. You know, maybe it's not on the same level as Zenith because it doesn't get to billions of damage, but it does have much better clear and it is overall much faster. And in my opinion, much more fun, but of course that's subjective. The defenses on this character are just having a big HP pool, being Chaos Inoculation, which is honestly like insane, being CI is insane, physical damage is our weakness, but what we do is we can use things like you can see here on his chest, 12% of physical damage from hits taken as Chaos, so that's like 12% Physmit that we get from that. And the rest we're just getting from having just a raw amount of HP as well as endurance charges. But that's kind of our weakness is physical damage, but we could still tank the biggest physical damage hits in the game, like Shaper Slams and all of that kind of stuff. And you'd be surprised that actually still elemental damage can be what kills you if you have like insane amounts of elemental as extra on your T17 maps. That is where you'll start seeing your HP bouncing around. But I was pretty comfortably farming T17s. I did level to 99 in them, but Detonate Dead and Volatile Cores just kicked my ass, so I didn't manage to get to a level 100. Doing them, I was basically just doing Abominations and farming Scarabs and that kind of stuff. It has no problem doing any of the Uber bosses. None of that is really an issue whatsoever. You can tank everything they do, you just stand there and face tank everything. And yeah, there's a lot of things that this build is good at and very few that it's not good at. So that's kind of like one of those things that like that I really enjoyed about this character. So some core pieces, you're going to be using your Natural Instinct. This is absolutely mandatory. It gives you so much here. And on top of that, it gives you even more because you're using a Light of Meaning. And Light of Meaning gives you 3% increased energy shield for each passive in the radius. Because of the Unnatural Instinct allocating all of these small passives, this is going to bring me from 9,000 energy shield all the way to 11,480. We also use the Militant Faith. The Militant Faith, you want reduced mana cost of skills per 10 devotion. Very important because it's very expensive to cast spells these days, so you need Militant Faith with mana cost skill reduction. And then the secondary effect is going to be non-cursed auras. We also want Templar Avarius, since we are using the Relic and Patience boots, because it gives us Inner Conviction, which since we have 4 power charges, you know, it's going to give us 12% damage. So that's pretty cool. 12% more spell damage. Then we want a Necromantic Aegis Impossible Escape. Really important because this is going to be allowing you to get additional reduced mana cost here from Dreamer as well as this small node there. But then skill effect duration, some a little bit more damage, and a bunch of energy shield here and here. Now, the reason why you want skill effect duration is because Spark has many ways to scale it, but it has 2 components which you need to scale in order for it to feel good. You need skill effect duration so that your sparks stay around longer, and you need projectile speed so that your sparks are traveling faster, because the faster they are, the more they will bounce around an arena or an enclosed space, and the more times they'll have the ability to hit a target. So that's essentially projectile speed and duration are massive multipliers for your damage and things that you really need for your build to pop off. So that's why we grabbed the duration here as well as there. And that's why we're also grabbing as much projectile speed as humanly possible through our wands, our amulet, our gloves, having faster projectiles as the prefix, as well as you're taking aerodynamic as well as streamline for extra projectile speed. The rest of the build is pretty standard. There's not something too crazy going on, but there is still a lot of room for improvements as opposed to what I have right now. It's just this is where kind of like I'm leaving it at, as I'm going to be doing an SSF reroll very soon. But guarantee 2 large clusters. One large cluster is going to be a lightning damage one for Prismatic Heart, Widespread Destruction, as well as Storm Drinker. And then you can socket your 2 Forbidden Flesh and Flames in there, or whatever else jewels you have. A lot of people go for increased energy shield and crit multi-jewels. I decided to go for Mistwalker, because Mistwalker is giving me crit immunity while elusive, and I gain elusive on crit. Being crit immune in T17s is insanely important in my opinion, and I saw a massive bump in my survivability as soon as I grabbed these two. So Mistwalker was really good for me. If you actually don't have that, you can of course go for like increased energy shield, jewels, or something like that. But I definitely do recommend looking into getting a pair of Mistwalkers. On my Watcher's Eye, I got Grace Suppression, as well as increased lightning damage by Wrath and Penetration Zealotry. Now you can mix and match. You are using a lot of auras, so you can mix and match any of the beneficial modifiers that you have. But keep in mind that the Spell Suppress was very nice because that meant that I could use projectile speed tattoos instead of suppressed tattoos. That also meant that I had a little bit more leeway when crafting my gear. But for example, this was my old chest where I had 22% increased chance to suppress spell damage. With this chest, I didn't actually need that Grace Suppression. But with this chest that I have now, which is basically like an impossible craft to get the T1 suppress as well as like int, I ended up settling for 10%. So you can imagine that, like, yeah, 10% on this one, that's 12 difference and I'm capped, right? So if you had a chest like this, which is like the cheaper variant of this one, you wouldn't need that suppress. Now my chest is insane. It has 50% increased global defenses fractured on there. I just finished that yesterday. But this chest here is just as insane. As you can see, like the ES difference, like it's my auras are in there, so I deactivated them. 9,900 with the chest that I have right now, and then 9,400. So you're getting an extra like 500 ES or something like that by having 50% increased global defenses. It is by no means worth the extra cost of crafting as well as the base, but you know, you take upgrades wherever you can get with builds like this. Now of course you're using Mage Blood, and the reason for that is because, you know, Mage Blood is OP and you're getting max elemental resistances, and that's going to be helping you mitigate elemental damage. And we can take additional elemental resistances on here, which allows us to not get any elemental resistance anywhere on our gear. Super OP. Then chance to avoid being shocked, that's because we want to be using a Storm Shroud. Then we use immune to curses, basically reduced effect of curses. That allows you to run any curse map mod, it's not a problem whatsoever. And then avoid being stunned for quality of life. And of course the Silver Flask for additional cast speed and that kind of stuff. For the remainder of the clusters, you're just going to be going for a small cluster with 35% increased effect if possible. And you want to get, you know, intelligence as well as attributes if you can, because you are pretty much attribute starved on this build. Additionally, if you can't afford to get one of these, you can get one with a notable that reduces Grace, Zealotry, Reservation by 50% instead, or Wrath as well, right? Grace, Wrath, or Zealotry by 50%, and then with 2 small. So like basically still a 3 passive reservation efficiency cluster with 50% reduction to one of your big auras. We do grab a large spell cluster here. It gives us Essence Rush, which is pretty damn good. It gives you a ton of increased damage, as well as cast speed while you're leeching. Since you are Trickster and you will be grabbing the leech tendency point here, Soul Drinker, you're permanently going to be leeching as long as you're hitting stuff. We're also having 10% instant leech, and this instant leech is going to feel insanely good. And it's also allows you to circumvent less recovery maps and that kind of stuff, because you're just going to be getting a ton of ES on hit. It basically feels like way better than Claws because of how Spark hits so much. You're constantly full HP. Sometimes it looks like you're not even taking damage, but you are. It's just that your HP is filling up so fast. That's because Ghost Reaver in combination with the Leech increased total maximum recovery. Ghost Reaver, as well as being a Trickster, where you're getting that Overleech. It's basically like being a Slayer, but better because you have like 10k, so your leech instances are huge, and you're just permanently getting a lot of buffs from that kind of stuff. So yeah, like leech is very strong on CI, on Trickster. It's very good. The downside of this is, of course, that you cannot regenerate energy shield, and you know that kind of like synergizes with Chavron's Revelation, which says you cannot regenerate or recharge energy shield when it's in your left ring slot. But what it does is it gives you 40 mana regen per second, which is really important because we need a lot of regen. And on top of that, when catalyzed, it gives you 300 flat energy shield, which when I take this off, you can see it takes us down to like 9.7k to 11.4. So that's a crazy amount of ES. Anathema is really important for this build too, because it allows you to scale power charges, which gives you spell damage, but it also enables you to use a total of 4 curses. So it increases your curse limit to 4. We do that by clicking here Infused and putting our curses in a helmet with trigger socketed spells when you focus with a cooldown of 0.25 seconds. So when I click focus, you'll see that all of my curses go off. One thing to be mindful about is that they cost a ton of mana. If you look at here, the Sniper's Smart mana costs 24 plus 24 plus 39. You add all those up, 24 as well. You need to have that total amount of mana so that you can actually cast them. One thing I really need to stress is the importance of item bases. Item bases on this build is the reason why this build is actually like much stronger this league than it's ever been, and why we can afford to go without a shield and without actual energy shield boots. The reason is because they introduced the necrotic armor, which is absolutely absurd. As you can see here, you can get 3,787 evasion and almost 800 energy shield. And also the Lich Circlet gives you up to 600 ES on the helmet. It's absolutely insane. And I don't even have any energy shield whatsoever on my gloves, so all of it is coming basically from these two items, which is like insane to be able to get 11k ES out of two items. And that is because the Trickster synergizes really well with it. It gives you 5% evasion rating per 1 maximum energy shield on helmet. We get a ton of evasion this way, but we also get 1 maximum energy shield per 6 evasion on equipped body armor. So, you know, we have like thousands of that, so that we're gonna get so much energy shield from that evasion. So double dips, you manage to get like an insane amount of ES just from your body armor. Now, if I was to take off Discipline, you see I have like 9,000 energy shield, and I take this off and it takes me down to 4,000. So the chest is giving me 5,000 energy shield. It's just insane how much it gives you. Yeah, so you don't want to be crafting on anything except for the necrotic armor and the Lich's Circlet. It's absolutely mandatory. Now for the gloves, you can always go for Sorcerer's gloves instead, or I think some people use like the spell damage base. But I opted for the Warlock gloves, as I felt like damage was not an issue for me, and I just wanted to boost my ES to as high as possible to be as comfortable as possible in maps. So now, that is sort of what the build is, the showcase, all of the mechanics. One thing that you can actually cheap out on a little bit is, instead of going for a focused amulet, you can actually use a replica Dragonfang amulet, and the replica Dragonfang with Spark +3, of course, and that gives you reservation efficiency. And this reservation efficiency allows you to anoint something other than sovereignty. And I would recommend you go for long shot, as it gives you increased projectile damage, projectile speed, and yeah, it's just like a really good node to anoint on there, but you could do anything you like. So I'm gonna start off with the gloves, and I gotta be honest with you guys, the gloves is one of those slots that I prefer not to craft myself. Now, I ended up crafting my own gloves myself because I wanted to try to make them as perfect as possible on a Warlock base. But honestly, there are gloves out there that you can buy that are, you know, not elevated. So you can look for 20%, for level 20 here, 70%, and you just look on trade, and they're gonna cost you. I looked on a Warlock base with energy shield, so we're gonna take that off. We're gonna take off the white sockets too. You can see that they cost, yeah, like 40 divines or something like that, right? So 40 divines for a pair of gloves. Honestly, I would take that over crafting. Of course, don't get slower projectiles. You want faster projectiles. It's mandatory to get faster proj, but yeah, so like 50 divines or something like that to craft. But I'll teach you guys nonetheless how to craft it. Now, I found that you can craft with horror essences, so you would spam horror until you have faster casting or crit multi, but I didn't find too much success doing that myself. So instead, what I did is I crafted with fossils. But with horror essences, what you would do is you would craft until you have faster casting here. So imagine you had faster casting suffixes. You would have level 20, for example, here. And then at this point, what you would do is you would need to have a free prefix. So you'd have to annul off a prefix like that. We craft suffixes cannot be changed. And at this point, then you want to reforge with harvest, and you reforge caster. The only thing that can happen here is you can only get crit multi, but you're not guaranteed to get a higher tier of crit multi. You're guaranteed to get like, you know, anywhere between tier 1 and 3. And ideally, of course, you want tier 1. So at this stage, your gloves are pretty much kind of done. But you need to still craft suffixes cannot be changed. And reforge speed, which it's actually just going to be a harvest reforge right here. Reforge speed. As you can see, this can fill your prefixes, and that's the problem with old influences, and why I think this is just not worth doing yourself. I spent 150 divines before even getting a pair for my own. But yeah, you reforge speed, and ideally you're not going to be filling your prefixes, but you're going to be getting something like this. And then at this point, you just finish it off by crafting a prefix, which is pierce. And you just craft it on there. But you can actually go for pierce with a veil orb. And the way that you would do that is you would craft suffixes cannot be changed. And then use a veil orb. And hope that it doesn't remove your 20%, which it does there. And it does it again. You can see that it just loves removing that, right? But imagine it removes this. Then at this point, you would block conversion. Because it has the highest weight out of all of them. So you block convert. And you unveil, ideally pierce. So this. And now your gloves will be done. And you could do the exact same thing, but with fossils. But with fossils, the combination that I preferred using was etheric mixed with glyphic. This is going to be giving you the corrupted essence modifier. And then the last fossil is the critical strike fossil, which is deft. So you're going to be using this fossil combo. And you're going to be getting the critical strike a decent amount because you have increased chance, like times 10 likelihood of getting that. And you're just going to be doing that until you have faster casting, as you can see here. But if you have a suffix, of course, you have to annul it off. Hit it first time. And then you would just do the same thing again. Suffixes cannot be changed. And then harvest reforge caster, remember? Caster. And you would do that until you have 70%. But there are ways. So for example, if you have a T3, but you do have a, another influence prefix, or you can do suffixes can't be changed and then elevate, right? So at this point, like if I did suffixes cannot be changed, reforge speed, I would have faster projectiles. And you can use the orb of dominance. And that's how you gamble into getting elevated affixes. So that is how you get elevated cast speed or elevated multi as well. And what I had to go through to get the double elevated suffixes. So that would be like, suffix can be changed, reforge speed, Maven Orb for a 1 in 3 chance of pulling one FX into the other. And yeah, so the gloves are honestly like a pain, but that is how you do it. Also combo again is etheric, glyphic, deft. You're going to be doing that until you have either critical strike multiplier or faster casting. Then you use suffixes can't be changed, reforge caster, and then suffixes can't be changed, reforge speed. And that's how you end up with these gloves. Now, you reforge caster on the crit as well, but that's a 50-50 of getting faster casting because there is also another cast speed suffix that you can hit. So it's not guaranteed when you get crit multi instead of faster casting, and that's why it's better to just roll off of faster casting instead. Yeah, the gloves are a pain. I don't really recommend it, but you can do it. Now, for the wand is much easier, but there is still a bunch of RNG involved. But luckily, this is just going to be a essence craft. People are charging insane amounts for fractures. I would not buy those fractures. Instead, I would go for a dread essence, and I would spam the dread essence until I have either tier 1 cast speed, tier 1 mana, or tier 1 spell damage. Those are the 3 other affixes that I would look for on a wand. So you would basically like spam your wand with this projectile speed essence until you have T1 cast speed, T1 mana, or something like that. So your wand would end up looking like this, cast speed. For example, we craft that and we make that T1. Looks like we have full suffixes, so let me just remove this. So you would have like 32, 45, and you would have to, of course, have 4 affixes to fracture. So imagine you had something like this. Then at this point, this is when you go for a fracturing orb, and it's going to be a 50% chance to either hit projectile speed or cast speed. And if you hit cast speed, like I did in this case, you just sell this, and it's a huge amount of money. Like, it's super expensive. A profane wand with fractured cast speed, and we can look at it right now. We look at cast speed fracture. These cost 23 divs, and it costs about 7 divs for a fracturing orb. So overall, like, just by doing that, you're going to be profiting. You could even just sit there and do this all day, and you would just be profiting a ton. But of course, you could get unlucky and hit the wrong mod a bunch of times. But eventually, you get to the point where you have fractured projectile speed, which is what you want to be starting off with. So once you have fractured projectile speed, this is when you're going to be using Essence of Woe, which is it's going to be the spell damage essence. And you want to be using Essence of Woe until you hit T1 flat damage to spells. So that would be T1 flat damage to spells, lightning. If you have a situation where you have another spell prefix, unfortunately you just have to annul it. But if it is a non-caster prefix, and you can see that by when you hold alt, you see how it says caster, caster, If it doesn't have this tag and it's a prefix, you can safely annul that off by, for example, if I had like mana, it doesn't have caster tag on there. What you would do then is you would do, you craft a suffix, which is cannot roll caster modifiers. And then you just annul off the mana, as you can see. Now, at this point, this is where the gamble happens. You need to have full suffixes, first of all. So if you didn't have a suffix here, you would have to multi-mod. But if you do have a suffix, then all you do is you do cannot roll attack modifier. Now, this is really important because you need to have full suffixes before you do this, because if you do this without full suffixes, you will never get a prefix. Either multi-mod or make sure that you have another suffix on there. You do cannot roll attack modifiers. You use the harvest, and you're going to be add removing, so the augment lightning. Now, the only thing that can happen here is that it either removes this suffix, or any of these prefixes. So it's going to be a 50-50 chance to remove a good mod, aka the suffixes, or remove a mod that we want to keep, right? So, boom, in this situation, I got lucky and it removed the craft, and it guarantees you +1 all spell. But if in a case where it removes the flat lining, then you have to go back to essence spamming, right? And that's where it starts to get kind of expensive. But it is a 50% chance, right? You're going to be slamming +1 lightning, and at this point, you go again for, if you have the suffix sound still on there, you have to clean it. Make sure you craft the prefixes cannot be changed. Scour it down. And then we're going to be doing can have... Sorry, you're just going to be doing prefixes cannot be changed again. And use a veiled orb. It's going to give you a veiled suffix, and you want to be blocking damage over time. So damage over time multiplier, just craft that on. It can be any chaos, any damages over time, it doesn't matter. And there are 3 things you want to unveil. It's going to be double damage while focused, double damage, or cast speed. You can also go for critical strike multiplier if you're near a rare or unique. But that's another one that you can go on there. Yeah, we're just going to go for double damage. And then we finish it off by crafting critical strike multiplier, global multi. And that's it. That's our wand. And then you go and you spend 70 divines plus on getting your haunted implicit. Thanks, GG. Yeah, that's how you craft a wand. Now, next, you're going to be using a similar thing here with your necrotic armor. You're going to want to be fracturing for profit in order to get the base that you want to be using. So there are 3 different things that you could do. You could do int essence, so that's going to be spite, or you can do loathing essence, that's going to be reservation efficiency. Now, the price of those fractured depends, right? You have to look on the market, make sure that you see how much the amount of reservation efficiency fracture costs and how much the int essence costs. But for this example, we're just going to go for the spite essence, and we're going to spam that until we get T1 suppression. So we're just going to be sitting there until you get T1 suppress, and you know, we're just going to cheat that in. There's going to be a bunch of essences. Remember that you can always exalt as well until you have T1 suppress, because we want to be fracturing suppress. But in a situation where you also hit like T1 ES or something like that, you can also fracture those, because you can actually make a decent amount of profit just sitting there and fracturing. And you want to make absolutely sure that that is going to be like 22%. So use a divine orb. Int is not too important. Yeah. Now you can see that I have 5 affixes on this, but you don't have to risk your suffixes. What you can do is you can apply Eldritch Ember, and then you could just Eldritch Annul. So yeah, what you do is you just like apply an Ember, and then you would annul, and then it rolls off a prefix. Now you have a 50-50 chance to either fracture suppress or intelligence, and of course we want to suppress. And we fracture dexterity. Second time again, third time again, and we got int. This one you would just sell. Got int again, sell, cry, and then there you go. You got your spell damage suppression for much cheaper than market price. I can guarantee you that much. And you also made a little bit of profit by selling the intelligence fractures to the market. Now you can do that with any other T1 prefix as well. So like for example, if you have like T1 flat ES or % ES, those are pretty good to fracture too. So you can just send it then as well. Or yeah, you just look for suppress. But at this point, this is where you just want to be spamming dense fossils. And that is basically the only way that you can actually get energy shield prefixes. It takes a lot of these. It takes really a lot of dense fossils to get what you want. But you can also use exalted orbs, you know, eldritch exalts and kind of like that. You still have eldritch implicits. You know, you can always use annuls, exalts. And on average, it's going to be like a couple thousand of these dense fossils. But yeah, overall, like you'll just be hitting it in due time. If you have like T2 and T1, you can always just exalt as well, and you can settle for that. You can, of course, like try to look for T1% evasion. But yeah, use exalts, use annuls, and all that kind of stuff. And for your suffixes, you know, once you have your triple T1 prefixes, like imagine if I was to hit my triple prefixes here after dense fossil spamming. So I have T1%, T1 hybrid, and T1 flat. This is the ideal situation that you're looking for. At this point, that is when we want to be making Icar's dominant. So now we're going to have Eldritch Icar's being dominant, and we can safely annul off our suffixes. This will be crafting dexterity, but it's going to be the crafting bench dex. So we crafted, and then we want to exalt, and then we want to exalt. And we just want to repeat that until we get T1 int. You can see here that it's a 1.8% chance T1 int, but in due time, you're going to be hitting it. And this body armor at its current time. So if I was to like price check what's 3,700, let's go like 760, 22 suppress. At this time, it's gonna cost 123 divines or something like that, right? Yeah, 100 plus divines. I mean, this one's actually not that bad. If you're crafting them yourself, you'll end up saving money and maybe even making some money by selling the fractures to other people. So that is how you craft the body armor. Now for the helmet, we employ the same strat, profit crafting, while also going for what we want. And the best way to do it on this one is to use loathing essences. We use loathing essences until we hit something like T1%, T1 anything energy shield, right? Like so it's gonna be like T1 ES ideally, like T1% or something like that. Imagine that was like T1. One prefixes increased energy shield, and make sure you're divining these as well because nobody wants a low divine. So 10% with 100% like that, and you have another 50-50. You slam the fracturing orb until you get the right modifier that you want. Then you're going to be doing the same thing as you did on the body armor. You're going to be taking your dense fossils. So yeah, we love dense fossils this league, and I'm blind apparently, and we spam dense fossils until we get, you know, for example, like T1% or T1 flat. And at that point, like, whoa, this is actually, we got T1% and T5 hybrid. But yeah, you keep spamming those until you get like T1, T2, and then you exalted orb. And you have to do that over and over and over and over again until you get like, you know, triple T1. Another way to do it, which is how I did it, but this won't guarantee you a perfect helmet because you have to like lucky slam intelligence or use a veiled orb, is you can go for a fractured energy shield instead. So yeah, let's say like we have T1 ES, fracture that, then it's so much easier to get the remainder like T1 and T1. Then you would go for T1 there and then T1 flat. It's super easy to get that with loathing essence. Sorry, so you'd have to be doing that with like loathing essence until you hit like T1% energy shield, and then you just slam the last percent on. But honestly, like this craft, it's all of these crafts, they kind of suck, and that's why they're expensive and out of the cost of making a character like this. But yeah, you would just be like essence spamming until you have T1%, and then you slam on T1 energy shield, hopefully. But yeah, I think the dense fossil spam is much better, because that allows you to then control your suffixes. But hitting the prefixes is pretty hard. Just up to you how you wish to craft it, whether you do it from percent energy shield or whether you do it from the loathing fracture. It's up to you. So yeah, I would recommend you do the loathing fracture instead. The last piece is going to be the focus amulet. Not exactly mandatory, but the focus amulet, you will be using scorn essence, and you roll your scorn essence until you're hitting +1 to all, or +1 to lightning, as I did here. You can see that I got pretty lucky. Got +1 to lightning. And at this point, all you do is you use a veiled orb. You just chuck a veiled orb, and you're really hoping to remove the other affix. So it's going to be a random affix that it removes. But in this case, like if it removes that and you want to be unveiling increased prod speed. And if you don't get increased prod speed, you cry and you go again. But ideally you remove this mod and you add increased prod speed to your amulet. So that's basically what you're going to be doing here. Doing that over and over again. And this looks like when I did it myself. You unveil, and again, you didn't get increased prod speed, so you cry. You unveil again, and I honestly don't know what the odds are. I don't want to know, but yeah, increased prod speed. There you go. And you got your amulet. It's that easy. Now just do that in game. And then wait a minute. because now you can do even something crazier. You can Hina Chorus, lock it, and reflect it. Hype. That's what everybody and their mother is doing, and it's crazy, and you can post it to Reddit. But I am 3 locks down, and look what I get. I get garbage. Wait, hang on. There it is. Reduce prod speed, and it doesn't even go +2. I get garbage, bro, and they cost so much money, and it's just not worth. So yeah, but this amulet in itself, it's pretty worth. Yeah, that is how you craft every piece on this build, and everything that you need to know about the build. Hopefully, the POB is going to be linked in the description. I'm going to be linking 2 POBs, one of my early progress and one of my finished variant, which is kind of like what I have right now. But you can take it further than this, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to be taking it further. I'm sorry this video is so long, but there was so much information that I feel like a lot of people needed to succeed with this build. I hope this was helpful. I hope you guys get the chance to play this build, and I'm sorry it's really expensive. Not a people's build. Don't go for percent increased global defenses, it sucks. The way you do that is you get a grasping mail with global defense prefix on its own, and then you get a necromancer thing with no prefixes, and then you merge it, and then you fucking have to go for the fracture with the fracturing orb, and it's gonna be 1 in 4 chance of getting that, and it sucks. And then you have to craft it. It's impossible to get T1 suppress on it, and then you have to make up for the suppression elsewhere by getting tattoos or like getting the Watcher's Eye or allocating Mage Bane or doing some cringe shit. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate you. Bye bye.